and happy Tuesday morning to you. It is January 11. The time is definitely rolling on by. I am Lisa Joseph alongside Hilma DeMarc. Welcome to the studios of the National Television Network, NTN. And as always, it's the morning update with Lisa and Hilma. We're always happy to be here with you to share information on our national development, information on national issues, and certainly COVID-19 rolling on from 2021 into 2022. Hilma continues to be a focal point in all aspects of our lives. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Lisa, and good morning to you viewers as well. You know, you could always join us here on the National Television Network, Channel 122, as well as our Facebook and YouTube channels. And it's always a pleasure to be here with you. Yes, it is Tuesday morning. We have seen quite a bit of an increase when it comes to our COVID numbers. And of course, the Ministry of Health is keeping us informed day by day with the updates when it comes to that. We also had a statement recently by the Chief Medical Officer who kind of gave us an overview of, or a comprehensive update of where we are so far.
Yeah, and it is certainly, you know, we've been speaking about the fifth wave, and that conversation began in December, for like mid-December, thereabout, because we knew that the festive season was approaching. The Ministry of Health and Wellness and Elderly Affairs had come out the gate very early and indicating that we would definitely in a risk period.
Yes.
And so we ought to have been very vigilant. But, you know, Homer, we said it all the time throughout this COVID pandemic, that COVID-19 is reliant on people for transmission. And so once you have activity, all forms of human activity is going to drive the pandemic. And so we know that we had the travel was up because lots of returning nationals wanting to be able to see their family members, spend some time, revisit their home, connect. And certainly, you know, we had visitors as well. So the tourists coming in. So we certainly had that high-risk activity going on. Parties were being held. Some of them were not being held within the constraints of what the regulations were. And so that as well added to the risk factors of some of those activities. And so the Ministry of Health, just knowing that this would have happened, would have put in certain mechanisms in order for them to be able to manage what this fifth wave would be. But what we have is the unknown variant there. Not that it's unknown, but in terms of that unknown factor, because we do not know as yet whether the Omicron variant. So the Ministry of Health has been operating on this sort of premise that it is here. And so they've been doing everything in terms of establishing some of its measures in order to be able to deal with the possible entrant of the Omicron variant. And so we know that Omicron, the World Health Organization has warned that we should not say it's milder, because it has proven to be certainly more transmissible than the Delta variant. What they're seeing is that persons who are vaccinated certainly are having a sort of milder, if you will, infection with the Omicron variant. But we will be hearing more about it, the WHO and its sort of pronouncements on Omicron, on the overall COVID-19 pandemic, whether we can have a possible end to this pandemic within a year or two. Are there more variants that we can expect? All of those questions are being answered, and that's in a press conference that was held by the World Health Organization earlier in the week. So we'll be getting to that. We'll be playing you as much as we can, at least a full half hour of that very, very critical information, because they are the ones. The WHO is the lead agency for the global community and especially when it comes to COVID-19.
Indeed, Lisa. One of the things I think is important that we've seen in this pandemic, as much as, the WHO is playing their part, our very own Ministry of Health is playing their part, we also need to take serious personal responsibility, because as much as, yes, restrictions can be put in place, yes, there can be protocols, it's a balancing act, because the economy is also affected, and you want to ensure that you're kind of balancing, ensuring that we kind of secure our economy, but we ensure that we protect our people as well. So we need to take a sense of personal responsibility to ensure we're playing our part. And as much as you may be feeling, I'm frustrated, we've been doing this for 2 years, I cannot be as social as I used to be. Imagine having to go through this for another 5, 10 years.
There is no way that we would. Yes, we would have to adapt, because that is the nature of mankind. Throughout the centuries, you have to adapt to whatever the new reality is. But on the economic front, certainly, how do you really adapt when you would have, traditional jobs that really require that face-to-face? How do you now transition that? Because how do you make that sort of transition? And so jobs that are being lost, there are scores of jobs being lost here. And the reality is that the workers, now they need to pivot. And how do they begin to pivot? So, there's a whole ecosystem that needs desperate attention. Because if someone, was a shopkeeper and that shop has closed, what happens to that individual? We're talking about what is the person's skill level? How do they now upskill in order for them to be able to pivot to another sector? I mean, these are, and what do they do in the meantime that they're upskilling? How do they pay their bills and feed the family? I mean, it's so stressful. Just saying it, and I'm stressed.
Yeah, and the pandemic has really pushed, and just listening to you speak about that, it has really pushed us to kind of a digital landscape. It has kind of fast-tracked the way that we use technology. And I think it's somewhat of a good thing, but we do have a population, the older generation, who may not be necessarily as ready to use technology, or they may be a little apprehensive when it comes to actually learning that and adapting to it as well.
Well, I don't know so much about that, because I am seeing some senior citizens with their phones.
They are people who are fully into it.
They are on top of it. so I think, because it's the in thing, it's fad, it's fashionable, but yes, in terms of being able, I think the application of the technology as well is important, and businesses as well. But in order for businesses to make those changes too, it also takes a toll on them financially, especially that working remotely, working from home, that idea, because there are a range of issues that need to be discussed. You have people working from home. Are they using their own devices? Our businesses now need to purchase devices to give to individuals to be at home.
The idea
Who's
of
paying for, the internet payments and calls people need to make and so forth? I mean, there are a range of things. Are we setting the same work hours? Are we using those same work hours? How do we determine the overtime? Because you're at home, who's to say that you passed that stipulated 4:30 or 5 p.m., and so there are a range of issues. And certainly if we are going to follow through with the path that COVID-19 has set, we need to be able to now have all of those discussions on the national level for us to be able to put in place that, again, that whole ecosystem.
That'd make
to be
for
able
a good
to
show,
deal with
a
it.
good discussion to have.
Yes, absolutely. And we will be able to flesh out a lot of those within the coming months, so that we can as well, that sort of awakening, that conscious awakening is so important. And especially, independence is coming up. Right now we're celebrating the Nobel Laureate Festival.
Yes.
We have independence coming up, and yesterday, just to mention that the National Awards Committee, we had the conversation with the chair, Mauricia Thomas Francis, and Sharon Ephraim, who is a member of that committee, and discussing the award. So the nomination process. Nominations are over, and you have up until January 28th for you to be able to submit those nominations. Go online, National Awards Committee, find that, and so that you can nominate St. Lucians who have done impactful deeds in the society. And they need not be St. Lucian nationals or St. Lucian citizens, but individuals as well who have contributed to the overall development of St. Lucia. And so you can revisit that conversation that I had with the National Awards Committee. It is on our Facebook page, it is on our YouTube channel, and as well, you could always tune in when it is on NTN. So again, Homer, that is part of being able to identify St. Lucians who bring solutions to the table, which is what COVID-19 really dictates right now.
Very true, Lisa. And speaking of the Nobel Laureate Festival, we can definitely check the calendar of activities and see what's happening. Today is the 11th. There's no activity set for today. However, tomorrow there is the St. Lucia's Queen's Commonwealth Essay Writers Awards 2021. That one is set to commence at 10 a.m. at that Finance Administrative Center. That's at Point Seraphim in Castries. And you could check out the Nobel Laureate Festival St. Lucia on Facebook and their YouTube channel as well to be able to tune into that. That should be very interesting for that one. And then we have the 17th, Metaphorically Speaking with Delia Dollar, which I'm excited.
Yeah, which we said we totally wanted to be able to.
I am excited. She piqued our interest definitely on the show yesterday. And that's something that you could definitely check out as well. I think there is another episode of that on Wednesday, the 19th of January as well. So these are some of the activities on the Nobel Laureate Festival calendar that you could definitely look forward to in this coming week. And
yes, so let's celebrate St. Lucia's excellence. St. Lucians, whether they're here or abroad, we are fantastic. We are very educated individuals, we're intellectuals, we're creators, movers and shakers, if you will.
Indeed.
And so we are able to do just anything under the sun. We are as good as anyone, anywhere on the globe. So that is important for us to be able to highlight that and to inspire the younger generation as well, or inspire just anyone, because right now, the thing is that you need no longer be 20 years old for you to jump into a career or to do something.
Very true.
You can be 75 and decide to do something different and, and come out and showcase your talents and so forth. The world right now does not stop. Just because you've passed 45 or 55 or 65.
And the fact that knowledge these days are really at your fingertips, you really can decide that I want to be this and immerse yourself into it and learn a new skill and delve into something new, which I think is really cool. I was watching, was it an interview or reading an article where this architect, this lady who was an architect for most of her life, and then one day she decided she didn't want to do this anymore, and she started designing wedding gowns. And they're absolutely beautiful, Lisa. And I can imagine, I stopped to think about it, and I guess her design ability in architecture and being able to draft for buildings kind of lent to her ability to learn the drafting of patterns for clothing. But for me, it still was really amazing that you just decide one day, I went to school for this, but I no longer want to do it anymore. And you just take those skills and apply to something different.
Something else. And I've never been of the school of thought that we should be boxing ourselves in, and that because you've been in one job for 20 years, 25 years, that you can't wake up one morning and change and do something else. Or that you do not allow yourself to have multiple streams of income. Because I find sometimes in St. Lucia, we are afraid of doing that. We do not allow ourselves to expose our talents that way. So you may have a full-time job, but you have a skill and a talent in something else that you can work on and bring in additional income. So the idea of having 2 jobs and 3 jobs, we tend to look at it in the context of people in those metropolitan cities. You know, you in the US, you in Canada, the UK, and you have to have 3 jobs in order for you to survive, because depending on where you're living in those places, the cost of living is astronomical.
Right.
But it also lends to just being so active, productive, you know, gives you that full sense of purpose as well. So you have that additional income, but it also does something to your own human spirit. And I always like to think of that, the human spirit. How are you feeling when you wake up in the morning? Do you feel driven? Are you thinking of the next new high for you to have, just as a form of self-accomplishment? It may not mean anything to your next door neighbor or to a member of your family, but you know within yourself, you know, you have pushed yourself to a particular limit. You've gone outside of your comfort zone to accomplish something. That does something to you on the inside.
It really
so
does.
I want all of our people, and especially our young people, to begin to think in that sort of dimension. Because when you do that, you will have less time for all of those negative thoughts and negative activities around the place, less time to you know, for crime, and because you just on your hustle.
I agree, Lisa. I agree, and I totally agree with you when it comes to the feeling that you get, that sense of accomplishment. For me, I think it takes a certain mindset. You need to understand that you're doing it for that, because sometimes it's a little more difficult. I feel like sometimes I pick up my phone and I find myself just scrolling mindlessly through social media, and that's not what I picked it up for at all. So being able to be very disciplined to when you are going behind your goals are important, but that sense of accomplishment where you've been spending weeks trying to understand something and you finally get it, I think that that really is a feeling that cannot be beat. And if you set and it does not necessarily have to be something new. It can be you trying to get better at, you know, what you're currently doing. Because maybe it's not where you want to be, but it can open doors and it can lead to something else. It can lead to the next big thing. So definitely take advantage of social media, take advantage of the place that we're in now, trying to advance yourself. It is really important, and I think it is not only important for you economically on getting you know, new ways of gaining income, but that personal development is really important.
It's very important, and you see that, and I'm thinking that, you know, the mantra should be keep social media within context.
I like
so
that.
What is the context of social media in your life?
That.
And I think that's important. Everything in your life must have context, and you need to establish boundaries for social media and identify the context of social media, its existence in your life. That is so important.
I
That
agree.
really helps you to get that discipline and establish those boundaries as well.
So look at it as a tool and not necessarily for entertainment.
It can be both. It can be both. But when you've established those contexts, then you are able to now better half what that discipline is going to be with it. But you know, we speak about the youth, and we've spoken about you know, economic generation and so forth, and you know, as we go on, Herma, it will be great because the youth economy is beginning to bud. And so we'll be having discussions on the youth economy, what the plans are, identifying, you know, the programs and so forth. So it is going to be quite healthy for the mornings with Lisa and Herma that will be discussing a lot of those development issues. Before we get to the WHO's press conference, and you mentioned earlier our CMO, Dr. Sharon Belma George, giving us some insight into where we are at in the COVID pandemic, and just want to go over some of those points that she gave us in her presentation. So we are seeing a daily rate for the last 7 days that is at 99 per 100,000 in the population per day, with a 36% testing positivity rate and a transmission rate of 3.3. In all, we've had 306 COVID-19 deaths. There are 21 positive cases that are now admitted at the respiratory hospital. 1 is critically ill and 4 are severely ill. Now, since the commencement of the 5th wave on December 16, there have been 1,967 cases diagnosed with an average of 82 cases per day. We're breaking it down statistically now. Women account for 58% of the cases, and 10 COVID-19 deaths have been recorded for women. The tourists are accounting for 9% of the cases, and the prevalence increase is noted mainly in the Castries, Grosseray, Dennery, and Babonneau districts. That has always been the trouble spots for COVID-19 from the beginning of the pandemic. So, given the transmission rate, positivity rates, the increased activity cases, there's been increased surveillance for the Omicron variant, which is characterized for the high level of transmission. And the CMO did reiterate that we still have the Delta variant in circulation locally. And so as school now has reopened, this is day 2. So we have some schools that are going the whole day model or approach. Those are doing, you have the blended approach taking place as well. You have the approach taking place?
So I believe it's 66 schools doing the face-to-face, and there are 34 schools doing the alternate day, and it's based on the size of the school population as well as the physical infrastructure. So for example, there are schools where kindergarteners are doing all these, whereas as well as grade 6, the critical grades, grade levels that require more face-to-face, whereas the other students are doing, maybe coming in 2 days. So one set of the students are coming in every Tuesday and Thursday, whereas the other set would be coming in on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. But they would still have the online classes on the days where they're not within the schools. So that's just to kind of manage the number of students within the school area. And that is if the school cannot sustain the large number within the population, the school population.
Yeah, because you need to be able to maintain the social distancing. And the CMO did give some advice to parents, teachers, and students on how they ought to remain safe, Homer. And the number one thing there is to support the children psychologically, giving them information and daily reassurance. Very key.
Information, and daily reassurance.
Because, children are, children are scared too.
Sure.
They have concerns as well. And so as a parent, you need to be able to calm your child, and certainly you need to be informed in order for you to be able to do that. And so you need to get that information yourself, and you need to be able to, say to your child, okay, but if you do those things, this is how you're going to stay safe. And it doesn't mean that because you're going outside or you're going to school, that you are going to fall sick.
Sure.
It doesn't mean that, but you just need to do the things that you are told to do in order to remain safe.
Right. I believe in addition to that, she spoke to cooperation between parents and teachers to ensure, safety measures are put in place to keep the children safe within the school, which is important, especially when you have children who may not necessarily be able to take that personal responsibility. The younger children, you want to ensure that you have that conversation with the teachers to ensure that they're doing what they're supposed to do.
And so if your child is developing respiratory symptoms, you want to seek medical care and do not send the child to school. That's so important.
That is so important.
Because how often have we heard about people and they know they've been diagnosed with COVID-19, but they take in the bus because they need to come to town and they want to go to the supermarket and they want to, they want to continue their life as if nothing is wrong, but they're COVID-19 positive.
True, and we've noted that children in or within or outside of the school setting, they account for about 10 to 11% of our positive rate so far. So you do want to ensure that if your child is experiencing respiratory symptoms, that you're not putting people in danger. Because if one child goes to school, imagine the number of families that can possibly be affected. So if your child is experiencing respiratory symptoms, yeah, leave them at home.
Yeah, and it's flu season as well, so be mindful of that.
True.
And if you want to be absolutely certain that if respiratory symptoms have been developed within yourself or your child, that you really get to know exactly what the situation is, because let's not forget that there is still the flu out there.
Very true.
The very normal flu.
Very true.
So it is out there as well. Clean face mask for school daily, that's important. Now, the schools also have a supply of face masks as well, because I know some people are saying, well, every day I have to, no, but you need to be able to provide that for the children. But in the event that perhaps it's forgotten, because these things do happen, the schools do have a supply. It's not an unlimited supply,
right,
but there is a supply that they can certainly give a child a mask or two if that is needed.
Yeah, which is not to mean that you could send a child and say, tell your teacher, give you a mask.
No, that's why it's not an unlimited supply.
Right. Right.
It's just a supply.
Yes. In addition to that, of course, within the schools, ensuring regular cleaning of surfaces and sanitation of all school environments, of course, is important for the children. Ensuring that your child remains in quarantine or isolation if they were a direct contact of a case, or a member of your family, your household is positive, like we were speaking about earlier. If you know, maybe the child does not have it or is not showing symptoms, but within the household there's somebody who may have been affected, or the child came in contact with somebody who tested positive, you want to ensure that the child remains in quarantine or isolation.
Now, I know the frustration with quarantine and isolation. There is a frustration with that, Huma, because maybe, yes, you were around somewhere that someone was positive, but you feel fine. And so for you, but I feel fine. Why do I need to stay in a room? Why do I need to be holed up? And exactly. And so it's important for you to be able to take that time and see whether, in fact, you would develop any symptoms at all. So that's critically important. But certainly, limiting social activity, and that's across the board. It's for the general population and for the schools as well. And certainly, we're encouraging the vaccination of children 12 to 17 years old, the teachers and school support staff as well. So we know that in St Lucia, the government of St Lucia has provided now the Pfizer, AstraZeneca, the Johnson & Johnson vaccines, which is the Janssen vaccine, that one shot. So they're available at the various wellness centers and as well as the vaccination sites. So, Mom.
That is true, Lisa. So just to go through the cases, the recent cases, reported by the Ministry of Health on Monday, that's the 10th of January, the Ministry of Health, Wellness and Elderly Affairs confirmed a total of 271 new cases of COVID-19. The samples were processed on Sunday, that's 9th January, at the Ezra Long Laboratory and Laboratory Services and Consultations Limited, from a total of 629 samples. They were collected from January 7th, 2022 to January 9th, and this number of positive cases makes up 43.8% of all samples which were processed on that date. So we see that positivity rate increasing. There were also a few deaths which were noted. So let's see here. The Ministry of Health also reported 3 new COVID-19 deaths and 1 new COVID-19 related death as well. Also, confirmation was received of the recovery of 51 individuals diagnosed with COVID-19. So this brings the total number of active cases in country to 1,586. If you are looking to get vaccinated today, that is Tuesday. Vaccination will be at the Grosley Human Resource Center, the V4 RC Parish Hall, as well as Larry Shoes Constituency Council People's Discount, and that's Victoria Street, from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m.
Right. Now also at the VG Multipurpose Complex, or Sports Complex, They've now erected a contact tracing site. So that's it's a temporary testing site here at the VG Sports Complex, right there at St Lucia outside our office. So what they'll be doing there is swabbing individuals, and that's only persons who are contacts of positive COVID-19 cases. So they're doing the contact tracing there. The VG Sports Complex will be undertaking the swabbing on Mondays to Fridays. That's happening from 8:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. And if you're experiencing respiratory signs and symptoms, as always, please go to the respiratory clinics. They are the Grocery Polyclinic, the Leclerc Wellness Center, the Dennery Hospital, the VA4 Wellness Center, and the Soufriere Hospital. And the ministry is reminding you that the Leclerc Wellness Center Respiratory Clinic will be open on Saturdays and Sundays as well from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. So very critical there. Don't forget Mondays to Fridays. If you are the contact of someone who've contracted COVID-19, you can go for your testing. Your swabbing is being done there at the VG Sports Complex from 8:30 to 4 p.m. Most important.
And finally, for me, Elisa, the Ministry of Health, Wellness and Elderly Affairs is informing the public that there's a temporary closure of the Vanna Wellness Center. That is from today, the 11th of January 2022. That is going to continue until Friday, the 14th of January 2022. During this time, individuals are encouraged to visit the Jackmel Wellness Center or the Bexar Wellness Center to access primary healthcare services. Of course, the ministry apologizes for any inconvenience that this may cause to you, and you can contact the Community Nursing Service if you require further information at 468-5321. That's 468-5321.
Okay, so now we want to continue on, but certainly focus now from the World Health Organization, the press conference, the first for 2022. And we now go to the opening remarks from the Director General, Dr. Tedros, for the WHO.
I will hand over to Dr. Tedros to give us his opening remarks. Dr. Tedros, you have the floor.
Thank you, Margarita. Happy New Year. The dawn of a new year offers an opportunity to renew our collective response to a shared threat. I hope global leaders who have shown such resolve in protecting their own populations will extend that resolve to make sure that the whole world, is safe and protected. And this pandemic will not end until we do that. Last week, I asked everyone to make a New Year's resolution to get behind the campaign to vaccinate 70% of people in every country by the middle of 2022. And on top of that, to ensure that breakthroughs, treatments, as well as reliable tests are available in all countries. To end the acute stage of the pandemic, the highly effective tools science has given us need to be shared fairly and quickly with all countries of the world. Vaccine inequity and health inequity overall were the biggest failures of last year. While some countries have had enough personal protective equipment, tests, and vaccines to stockpile throughout this pandemic, many countries do not have enough to meet basic baseline needs or modest targets which no rich country would have been satisfied with. Vaccine inequity is a killer of people and jobs, and it undermines a global economic recovery. Alpha, Beta, Delta, Gamma, and Omicron reflect that in part because of low vaccination rates, we have created the perfect conditions for the emergence of virus variants. Last week, the highest number of COVID-19 cases were reported so far in the pandemic. And we know for certain that this is an underestimate of cases because reported numbers do not reflect the backlog of testing around the holidays, the number of positive self-tests not registered, and burdened surveillance systems that miss cases around the world. While Omicron does appear to be less severe compared to Delta, especially in those vaccinated, it does not mean it should be categorized as mild. Just like previous variants, Omicron is hospitalizing people and it's killing people. In fact, the tsunami of cases is so huge and quick that it is overwhelming health systems around the world. Hospitals are becoming overcrowded and understaffed, which further results in preventable deaths from not only COVID-19, but other diseases and injuries where patients cannot receive timely care. First-generation vaccines may not stop all infections and transmission, but they remain highly effective in reducing hospitalization and death from this virus. So, as well as vaccination, public health social measures, including the wearing of well-fitting masks, distancing, avoiding crowds, and improving and investing in ventilation are important for limiting transmission. At the current pace of vaccine rollout, 109 countries would miss out on fully vaccinating 70% of their populations by the start of July 2022. The essence of the disparity is that some countries are moving toward vaccinating citizens a fourth time, while others haven't even had enough regular supply to vaccinate their health workers and those at most risk. Booster after booster in a small number of countries will not end a pandemic while billions remain completely unprotected. But we can and must turn it around. In the short term, we can end the acute stage of this pandemic while preparing now for future ones. First, we must effectively share the vaccines that are being produced. Throughout most of 2021, this was not the case, but toward the end, supply increased. Now it's crucial that manufacturers and those donating countries share delivery timings ahead of time so that countries have adequate preparation to roll them out effectively. Second, let's take a never-again approach to pandemic preparedness and vaccine manufacturing so that as soon as the next generation of COVID-19 vaccines become available, they are produced equitably and countries don't have to beg for scarce resources. A few countries have provided a blueprint for how high-quality vaccines and other health tools can be mass-produced quickly and distributed effectively. And now we need to build on it. WHO will continue to invest in vaccine manufacturing hubs and work with any and all manufacturers who are willing to share know-how, technology, and licenses. I'm encouraged by some of the vaccines currently going through trial where innovators have already committed to waiving patents and sharing licenses, technology, and know-how. It reminds me of how Jonas Salk did not patent his polio vaccine, and in doing so, saved millions of children from the disease. Let's also invest and build the public health and health systems we need with strong surveillance, adequate testing, a strengthened, supported, and protected health workforce, and an empowered, engaged, and enabled global population. And finally, I call on citizens of the world, including civil society, scientists, business leaders, economists, and teachers, to demand that governments and pharmaceutical companies to share health tools globally and bring an end to the death and destruction of this pandemic. We need vaccine equity, treatment equity, test equity, and health equity, and we need your voices to drive that change. Equity, equity, equity. No place is this message of equity more true than in countries or regions dealing with humanitarian crisis and conflict zones. In these areas, tackling the pandemic as well as keeping health services on track is extremely challenging. The base requirement for life-saving intervention is humanitarian access. And we are on the ground in every humanitarian crisis and in all instances have found ways to reach populations with aid and supplies. For example, in Afghanistan, until recently, over 3/4 of health facilities reported stockouts of essential medicines, and there was a threat to sustaining health workers in their posts. But as of December, over 2,300 health facilities had received new supplies, and 25,000 health workers have been paid, ensuring the functionality of 96% of the health system through a joint WHO-UNICEF effort, especially the Sahat Mandi program. In Ethiopia, WHO was able to dispatch 14 metric tons of medical supplies to Afar and 70 metric tons to Amhara in December. 2 places have been affected by the conflict. In Tigray, WHO has not been permitted to deliver medical supplies since mid-July of last year. This is despite repeated requests from WHO to provide medical supplies to Tigray region, which would help meet some of the humanitarian and health needs in Tigray. Even in the toughest periods of conflict in Syria, South Sudan, Yemen, and others, WHO and partners have had access to save lives. However, in Tigray, the de facto blockade is preventing access to humanitarian supplies, which is killing people. At the top, I spoke of how the new year is a time to renew. I urge all leaders and key stakeholders in conflict to remember that those who work for peace are the heroes history remembers. We need health for peace and peace for health. To build trust and save lives, a good starting point is to ensure humanitarian and health corridors are open in all conflict zones so international agencies and civil society groups can do what they do best: save lives.
The opening remarks there from the Director General of the WHO, Dr. Tedros, in the first press conference for the WHO for 2022, certainly outlining what the path is going to be for the new year, looking back at some of the accomplishments of the WHO in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. And, you know, in his closing remarks there, Homer, Dr. Tedros, you know, just made me realize that there is conflict going on in the world amidst all of this COVID-19 pandemic. And I'm thinking that if we have such anxieties dealing with COVID and the sort of disruption it has brought to our lives, we have populations around the world where they're dealing with war, unrest, and having to deal with COVID as well. And so, definitely it has given me a little pause there for thought.
Can you imagine the nightmare that these governments have to go through?
Yeah,
Deal with?
that is, and the populations themselves.
The population.
And so, Dr. Tedros there speaking about the resilience for governments, speaking to the resolve that governments must have in order for them to be able to really steer their populations into safety. And sometimes that would mean making tough decisions, that making unpopular decisions,
True.
but decisions that are ultimately necessary in order for us to be able to have some reclaim of our lives in a shorter period than not. I think we'll be able to share, throughout the week, Homer, a little bit more from this press conference, because the lead scientists for infectious diseases, immunization specialists, and so forth, they had some very pointed questions thrown at them dealing with COVID-19 and the Omicron variants and so forth, vaccination and so forth. And so we'll be able to share with you throughout the week snippets from that, so that we can add that to our arsenal of knowledge and certainly to add to the national conversation as well.
Indeed.
And for us here on the home front, tomorrow, Wednesday, which is the 12th of January, the Ministry of Health, Wellness and Elderly Affairs will be having our own press conference, the first for the year for the Ministry of Health. And that is going to speak to the fifth wave. It's going to speak to all of the reopening of school, the safety measures, and so forth. So it is going to be a press conference. It's going to be very wide-ranging on the aspect of COVID-19.
And that's taking place at 10 a.m. tomorrow?
That's taking place 10 a.m. right here, the studios of the National Television Network. It's going to be brought to you live.
Yes, so you can definitely tune in for that. Remember, channel 122 as well as our Facebook, our YouTube channels, we do strive to keep you informed, give you the information that you need to make informed decisions, and so ensure that you stay with us and you keep viewing National Television Network. Lisa and Hilma, that's it for us.
We're saying goodbye until not tomorrow. Tomorrow we have the press conference. But on Thursday, we'll be back with you. But just to remind you that at the VG Sports Complex, Mondays to Fridays today, that's including today, from 8:30 a.m. until 4 p.m., you can go there if you were a contact of a positive COVID-19 case. And that's for contact tracing purposes. So they will be swabbing you there, and just so that you can be able to get that test done for you to determine that. So avail yourself of that if you have been a contact of someone who tested positive for COVID-19. Yeah, so
yes.
That's it from our end until Thursday. Lisa and Homer saying goodbye.
Derek Walcott lecture that we're having without Derek. And as you could see, it's entitled the Sir Derek Walcott Memorial Lecture.